Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Councillor Bill Kellett, Chairman of the Standards Committee. Welcome to the remote meeting taking place 9th of December 2020, which is being recorded live to the Council website and will be available to be viewed for a minimum of 6 months. Please be aware that any footage from the meeting can be used in subsequent media broadcasts. I would like to give a warm welcome to members and any members of the public or media who are watching this live feed of the meeting. I would also like to welcome the Head of Legal and Democratic Services and Monitoring Officer, Helen Lynch, the Governance Solicitor, Camilla Coulson-Patel, and Committee Service Officers, Jill Errington and Jill Hogg. Before I start with the formal business on the agenda, I'd like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for us all to follow. All participants, please mute your microphones, blur the background where possible. To speak, use the chat function on the right-hand side, type RTS, request to speak. Remember, everyone at the meeting can see the messages in the chat function. When invited to speak by the chair, remember to unmute your microphone. Once invited to speak, please introduce yourself with your name and position, unless you have already introduced yourself earlier in the meeting. If you are having any issues with connectivity, try switching off your video and just use the telephone function. If connectivity issues continue, you may have to leave the meeting and rejoin to get a better signal. If the chair is lost, the Vice Chair, Councillor Eunice Hutchinson, will take over until my connection is restored. Can we move on to the agenda? First one is apologies for absence, please.
Chair, we have an apology for absence from the independent person, John Dixon Dawson.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Have you any declarations of interest?
None, Chair.
None noted. Minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of March, 9 months ago. I don't think anybody can remember the meeting. I cannot. Anybody, the mover and seconder for the minutes, please.
Move them.
Moved. Agreed. Item 4, code of conduct update. Invite Camilla. Can you present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I am Camilla Coulson-Patel, the Governance Solicitor at Durham County Council, and I'm pleased to present the standing agenda item today relating to the Code of Conduct Complaints update, which is shown in pages 5 to 18 of your reports pack. Between the 6th of March 2020 and the 30th of November 2020, there have been a total of 29 formal complaints received. Of those, 14 decision notices have been issued in the last period, and the outcome of each complaint is shown at Appendix 2, which is the pages 9 through to 17 of your reports pack. Complaints which were rejected at the pre-initial assessment stage do not appear in the Code of Conduct activity shown at Appendix 2, but for members' information, in the last period there have been 3 complaints which were rejected or withdrawn prior to member notification at the pre-initial assessment stage for the period. In relation to training, training was proposed for the independent persons, which was due to be hosted by Durham on the 24th of April 2020. This was cancelled due to COVID restrictions. The training will be rescheduled in due course. The training will explore the role of the independent person in depth, discuss the key developments, including the new model code, and share experiences. Chair, the recommendations is for members to note the contents of the report, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Camilla. Do we have any questions from members at all? Eddie?
Chair, I would just like to say that there still seems to be a lot of media complaints, Facebook, and I'm just wondering, we've tried lots of ways of trying to alleviate this or make people aware. How is there another way forward? Can it be examined another way forward to try and make this go away or reduce it? Thanks.
Camilla, have you any answers on this one?
Yes, I can give an update. It is recognised that we continue to receive a high volume of complaints relating to social media. We do monitor trends, and there is still a pocket of complaints relating to social media. Pre-COVID, we have worked up a toolkit, a social media toolkit, which is under development. It has been delayed because of the lockdown period that we had and the disruption to work patterns. But what I will say is that work is now back on track, and it is planned that once that is signed off and presented to the Standards Committee, as well as any relevant other committees in the Council, that toolkit will be rolled out to all members with an opportunity for the delivery of a session to both town and parish councils. So we will open it up wider, because what we do find is it isn't limited to DCC councillors. Social media complaints, the trend is across the board. So it's the plan with myself and the monitoring officer that we will deliver a large session. How that will function now maybe is a little bit up in the air, but we will find a way. So we will look to deliver that sometime next year.
Is that helpful, Eddie?
Thank you, Chair. That's great news.
Anyone else? No? Nothing at all. Right, if that's the case, can we agree to recommend to note the contents of the report?
Agreed.
Okay. Item 5, the National Picture Standards Update. And Helen, can you present this report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. And as the Chair said at the outset, I'm Helen Lynch. I'm the Council's Head of Legal and Democratic Services and Monitoring Officer. This, again, the national picture is a standing item on your agenda, and this is the update on national developments since your last meeting in March. As always, we try and cover some of the complaints that have been reported since that time, and actually the first one relating to Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council picks upon the theme from the last report and the comments that Councillor Bell made there regarding social media. I think it's inevitable that complaints will relate to social media, whether they are well-founded or not, simply because of the wide use that social media gets by members, and we've discussed previously that it is a useful tool for members, if it is used correctly. The circumstances of this case were that a councillor retweeted an article which the complainants argued contained hate speech and was anti-Semitic in its content. And by retweeting the article, it was a signal of the councillor's endorsement or promotion of its content. The matter was referred to an investigating officer who actually found that the code wasn't engaged, because although the social media profile made reference to her activity as a Labour councillor, the context of the post and the content of the account was clear that it was in a private capacity. There was no council business on the account, and actually if members of the public were interested in her activity as a local councillor, they wouldn't have found it on that Twitter feed. So there was no breach of the code there, and that was accepted by the Council Standards Committee. But they did note, again, presumably because of the volume of social media complaints, that actually there was a training need, and there was training requested for all members on the use of social media. I think really the context is very key here. This councillor was found to be acting in a private capacity, but it demonstrates the point that we've again discussed previously around you can have a private feed that doesn't refer to any activity in relation to councillor, but because of the context of the post or other activity around that post, you could be found to be acting in your official capacity, and likewise using a councillor feed, you could still be in a private capacity. So it really is a case of looking at the facts, but of each case. But the social media toolkit that Camilla's referred to, that's under development, will hopefully help members navigate and use social media safely. The second case comes from Wakefield, and it's not directly related to the Code of Conduct, but it is relevant to the committee because it touches on the disqualification criteria under Section 80 of the Local Government Act 1972. Members will recall that you provided a consultation response on disqualification criteria last year. And under that legislation, councillors are disqualified if they are convicted of a criminal offence and sentenced to a minimum of 3 months imprisonment, whether that sentence is suspended or not. In this particular case, a councillor admitted sexual offences in August August this year, actually, but wasn't disqualified until they were actually sentenced. And the details of the sentence are in the report. But the chief legal officer of Wakefield actually had to issue a statement in relation to the council's powers in relation to this. And actually, the disqualification criteria did not bite until the point at which the councillor was sentenced. And I think it provides a very clear example that the powers of myself as monitoring officer and yourselves as the standards committee perhaps don't meet public expectation where you've got serious offences which have been admitted in those circumstances. Moving on to the activity of the Committee on Standards in Public Life, the Chair, Lord Evans, has written to the Secretary of State earlier this summer asking when the committee is going to receive the government's response to the report that they published in January last year on local government ethical standards. And a copy of that letter is attached at Appendix 2 to the report and highlights that, you know, the issues that we've discussed many times here is that the lack of a robust sanction regime leaves local authorities with no means of enforcing low-level sanctions or indeed dealing with the serious or repeated misconduct that we on occasions see. Lord Evans has also written to chief executives asking for updates as to progress in implementing the committee's best practice recommendations. And you will recall that shortly after the publication of their report in January last year, a report was brought forward to the committee which explained that we actually demonstrated 13 out of the 15 best practice recommendations with some changes to be made or clarifications or improvements. We still have 2 remaining changes that require approval from full council. The intention had been to take those to the annual meeting in May, but because of COVID that didn't happen, and so they'll now be presented to council in March 2021 as part of the annual review of the constitution, and they'll be taken forward there. So the response to Lord Evans' his inquiry is again attached to the report as Appendix 4, but pleasingly Lord Evans did actually acknowledge the council's response and has said that he's grateful for a full and clear response. We did also offer to keep him informed of our progress, and they've said they might come back to us in due course on that. We'll obviously keep you updated of any correspondence with the committee. And Chair, the final point to pick up is in relation to the recommendation within the Committee on Standards Public Life report regarding a draft model code. Now, the Local Government Association consulted over the summer in relation to a draft model code, and we held an informal meeting of the Standards Committee on the 21st of July to give you an opportunity to respond to that consultation, albeit we weren't in a position to meet formally as a committee. A copy of the council's response is appended to the report, and we await the outcome of that consultation and will update the committee in due course. Although I should say I've heard this week that the LGA's publication of a draft model code is imminent. They had indicated they were hoping to do so by Christmas. Obviously that's not far away now, but I am told it is likely to be in the next couple of weeks. So we will of course keep an eye on that, and if there is a draft model code published, we will bring it back to the committee to consider whether it's a code that we want to adopt as the council, and again hopefully we can time that to go through with the annual review of the constitution in March 2021, all being well. Chair, the recommendations at paragraph 3 of the report are to note and request that we continue to monitor progress and report at each meeting, and to consider whether there are any recommendations that you wish to make arising out of the content of the report.
Thank you for that report, Helen. Very lengthy and detailed, I like that. Any questions from members at all?
I have a quick question.
Yes, okay, Jim.
My question is relative to this media misuse thing. I think it's like everything else, you know, once people get started on it, they can't stop themselves. But from our point of view, I think there's got to be some kind of list, if you like a graph, if you like. So, I mean, take for instance, it's not something I do, so I would be unlikely to be highlighted, whereas it doesn't crop up that very so often. People do it. They can't help themselves once they get started. It is totally subjective. But from complaints point of view, from it coming to our committee, I think we'd get to a point where there would be a regularity if somebody was really poor at it, and there would be a regularity with those people who never do it at all. So there would be a numbers game there, a graph sort of thing. And from our point of view, we could look at the graph and say, well, look, these are a little bit consistent at it, and we'll train them better, we'll teach them better, we'll get the message home. And I don't think you'll eliminate it altogether, but it is, I mean, curiously, it's a very difficult problem. I mean, no case to answer is coming up all the time. So as you're looking at it, you've got to understand that many of these things, one's opinion against another, but a complaint still comes from there. So I just wanted to point that, well, put that forward as an idea that we could monitor it, but Helen might tell us something different.
Thank you, Jim. Helen, any comments?
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and for that, Councillor Atkinson. I think we would need to review the details of the specific complaints, but I'm not aware of any particular trends relating to individual councillors where complaints against the same councillor are cropping up repeatedly in relation to social media. I think you're right that we can assist councillors, and one of the things that the toolkit aims to do is to give members, ideas on how they can manage their social media accounts to put them in a good position to defend any complaints. We can't ever eliminate complaints. We will always get complaints, and people will always make them. But what we can do is make sure that members are adequately trained and supported to get the best use of social media and do so safely. Where we do get issues in relation to social media and there are concerns, we do pick those up. And if they're cases that go forward either on informal resolution or if we're to come forward for a standards hearing and social media was involved, it's highly likely that there will be a recommendation that the social media training is delivered. And I can think of one example in the last 12 months or so where there was an informal resolution for a member to have social media training, which I delivered in conjunction with colleagues from ICT, because it wasn't just about how to use it safely and think about the content and what you're doing. It was also about the technical side of things as well, and making sure you don't inadvertently like or do things that you perhaps don't realise you've done.
Okay, thanks for that, Helen. Any other questions from members? No, I don't see any. Right, so can we note recommendations, please? Take that as positive. And we move on to item 6, annual report to Standards Committee. Again, with you, Helen.
Thank you, Chair. So this is your annual report, which is slightly later than planned, which again is because of the impact that COVID-19 has had on your meetings. It follows the same format that it usually does, so it sets out your membership and also details of the independent persons, as well as a recap of the terms of reference. The report covers a summary of the code of complaints that we've received over the period 2019-20, and the table at paragraph 16 includes a comparison with the previous year, and you can see that, you know, over that period there have been 47 fewer complaints than in previous years. Not really sure why that is. We did notice a downturn in complaints as lockdown happened, and I think everybody was at home and there was limited activity, although, you know, that was March and that's the year end, so I'm not sure that will have a particular bearing, but you know, it's good to know that, you know, the number of complaints has been in fewer than in previous years. The majority of complaints continue to be made by members of the public, and the outcomes there are summarised in the final row of the table, and as well as the number of withdrawn or rejected complaints. And I think it's fair to say that where we reject complaints, we do so where it's a councillor that's clearly acting in their private capacity rather. And actually, it's also worth saying that where we are minded to reject a complaint, we consult the independent person on that as well, so that there's a sense check there in terms of how we're dealing with complaints. In terms of the work of the Standards Committee, I've already talked about your response to the Committee on Standards in Public Life report and the best practice recommendations in the earlier agenda items. And the report also sets out the work that you did in the review of the Employee Code of Values and Behaviours and Conduct, as well as the Member Code of Conduct. It's probably just worth reiterating that although your remit extends to Member Code of Conduct rather than Employee Codes of Conduct, you do help uphold the Council's statutory duty in relation to maintaining high standards of ethical governance generally, which is why it's appropriate for you to have some involvement in the oversight of Employee Code of Conduct matters, but without getting into specific case details. The report also refers to the training throughout the year that's been undertaken, which is largely in this last year been in response to recommendations on complaints rather than any group training. We had planned to do some group training in this year, but again, because of the COVID pandemic, that hasn't happened. But we will look to see how we can deliver some general code training, particularly if there is a new model code that we adopt. Going forward, we'll look to see how we can roll training out, perhaps in a virtual manner. And there's reference to a session that I think you attended, Chair, with myself in North Tyneside earlier on in the year in February, which was training for chairs and vice chairs of Standards Committee on developments in governance, and there was a session there on the work on the draft Code of Conduct. Chair, the recommendations are at paragraph 5 to note the report and to ask that the annual report is presented to the meeting of Council in January.
Thank you, Helen. To see one hand, one speaker.
I think I'll come in now, Chair, because I think that's probably me. I felt a bit like deja vu when I was reading through this, to be honest, and it was when I got to paragraph 12 about the independent persons being reappointed for a 4-year term, and I'm scratching my head thinking, I'm sure we've done that again. And of course, that's when you start to flick backwards and forwards and you think, yes, but this report finishes before March, and that's items of business that we've done since then, you know. But with that, it made me think, I know we're presenting this to full council in January, well, that's the plan. But is there any way that we can do, because it is so far out of date, you know, are all the committees just going to adopt the same sort of rationale and just present the report for, you know, for full council to agree? Or is anybody going to be given a sort of interim update? Because we would have, you know, this is so far behind, or are we just going to wait? And then I think we're going to have a whole run next year when the reports for this year. I just wondered what we thought about how to approach that. Just these little updates that have happened?
Chair, perhaps if I could respond to that.
Yes.
I think you're right. You know, ordinarily we would look to take this report to a council meeting in September or October, depending on where your autumn meeting falls. So the information is somewhat historic. It is good practice, and notwithstanding the delay in taking the report, I think it's important that we demonstrate there has still been governance work continuing during lockdown. But the annual report that goes next year should fall into line in its usual timetable. So by all means, if you would like me to, when I present the report to the annual meeting, we can in fact it will be the chair that presents it because it's his report. We can reference some of the activity that we will be reporting in the annual statement to come forward to cover that interim period. If the committee would like that, we can do that.
Well, Chair, I think that's for you to ask the rest of the committee, but I certainly would like people to realise that, you know, there has still been work going on. Indeed, there's a hearing coming up that some members have, you know, put themselves forward for. So I don't know how anybody else feels about that.
Any comments from any of the members?
Chair, Councillor Atkinson's asked to speak.
Yes, Jim, come on.
Yes, Chair. It's just Helen mentioning the word ethics there, but I think my question might be for a different place, maybe a bit of training. I'll go and see Helen myself. It was just basically how broad the subject is, and maybe on a pension fund, and we've got we're involved with a board, the course pension fund now. We brought up a topic the other day. It was a broad topic about climate changes, where everybody would have a different opinion. And when it goes to these people voting and things like that, ethics comes into it as well. But as I say, I think it's a broad scope meeting, maybe for a session for me to go and speak to Helen about. It's just the ethics thing. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Any other question, any other points? Helen, you want to respond to Jim?
I think just, Chair, I think the primarily the committee is concerned with the conduct of members and, you know, ensuring that appropriate mechanisms and governance frameworks are in place and working. I think I understand the point that Councillor Atkinson's making in terms of the ethical decisions around pension investments and things, which is a broader subject, but perhaps we can have a conversation offline about that, as he suggests. But just to steer on Councillor Clark's suggestion in relation to perhaps when you present the annual report to Council, if you would like to include a brief interim update, given the lateness that the annual report will be presented.
Thank you. Is that okay, June?
That's fine for me, yeah, thank you.
Okay, nothing else?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I mean, I don't know the rest of the council, but I'm not wanting to labour the point. It's just so that there's a reference made to the fact that because this is coming so late for adoption,
yes.
And just key points, really. You know, I don't want to sort of you know, steal the thunder from when the report actually comes in, but just a few key points. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nothing else. So with that, can we agree with recommendations?
Agreed.
Okay. We move on to independence, and I think it's you, Camilla, who's presenting this report.
Thank you, Chair. That is me to present the report in relation to the independent persons. Members will be aware that Durham County Council has two independent persons, Mr Peter Jackson and Mr John Dixon Dawson. Both have been appointed under the Localism Act and were appointed in September 2012, with their reappointment being confirmed for a further 4 years until the 21st of September 2020. The appointment of the independent persons would have been considered prior to the expiry of the term of office. However, following restrictions to minimise the spread of the COVID-19 outbreak, meetings of the council were suspended in March 2020. As it was not possible to hold a formal standards committee or council meeting prior to the expiry of the term of office, a decision was taken by the Director of Resources to extend the term of office of the independent persons to the 21st of September 2021. This decision was taken in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the Standards Committee, as well as the Head of Legal and Democratic Services. The decision was reported to full Council at its meeting on the 21st of October 2020. The extension of the term of office ensured the continued provision of independent persons within County Durham who are experienced and suitably qualified. Both independent persons, I'm pleased to report, expressed willingness and thanked the Standards Committee for the opportunity to continue to serve for a further year. Moving forward, we need to now consider the recruitment exercise. That is outlined in paragraph 16 of the report, which details the recruitment timeline for members to consider, which will take place between March and September 2021. In addition to the proposed recruitment, members are also asked today to consider the duration of the appointment. Under the Localism Act, there is no prescribed time limit on appointment. At Durham, it's been agreed that there will be a term of office of 4 years and is silent on the reappointment. The Committee for Standards in Public Life report, which was published in January 2019, recommended as good practice that each authority has 2 independent persons. That reflects the practice already in place in Durham. The Committee for Standards in Public Life also recommended that there is a fixed term of office. However, this would require a change in primary legislation. In the absence of primary legislation, it is possible for local authorities to determine their own arrangements. As I've already outlined, within Durham, there is a term of office of 4 years with no restrictions on reappointment. It is timely now, just before we consider the recruitment exercise, for members to review the term of office, and members are today invited to consider whether they wish to revise the term of office to reflect the best practice recommended by the Committee for the Standards in Public Life, which would be 2 years appointment with the provision to reappoint only once. This would effectively take the maximum term of office to 4 years. Members today are recommended to note the decision of the Corporate Director of Resources to extend the term of office of the independent persons to the 21st of September 2021, and recommend for approval to full Council the following: that a recruitment exercise be undertaken for the appointment of 2 independent persons, and that this be conducted by the Head of Legal and Democratic Services, the Monitoring Officer, with the Deputy Monitoring Officer and the Chair of the Standards Committee, and that the term of office and reappointment of the independent persons be brought in line with the recommendations of the Committee of Standards in Public Life to a 2-year term of office, which is limited to a 1 reappointment only, and that a further report be presented to Council seeking to appoint the 2 new independent persons in due course. Chair, those are the recommendations and an outline of the report, and I'll take any questions.
Right, Councillor Clark, I've got straight away.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Malcolm Clark, representing Delves Lane Division. It would seem logical to me, obviously, to reduce the administrative burden to have independent persons just come up at the same time that other councillors do, so the committee gets renewed. But I don't find the proposals offensive at all. I think it's, as long as it's easy enough to do it as per the recommendations, I'd like to propose that we adopt those as the officer recommends. Thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Any other questions or points to raise?
I could second that, Chair.
Second it.
Chair, Councillor Edward Bell has his hand up.
Eddie?
Yeah, Chair, I thought I'd go through the right procedures and put my hand up. I warmly welcome what Camilla has said. However, over a period of 2 years, an independent person might miss a particular meeting of the standards, and it might be quite a long time before they're actually involved with the standards committee per se. and over a 2-year period, they may only be involved in a few standards committees. And I would love to see some kind of mock standards committee where these independent people can come and really appreciate what is actually going on. And I don't know whether that kind of training can be instigated so that they felt as though that they are welcome and know exactly what we are actually doing, just the same as councillors do when they come to the meeting for the first time. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Eric. Helen, you want to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, really welcome that suggestion, Councillor Bell, and we could certainly look to do that as part of the independent persons induction programme. We would ordinarily hold, I think it's 4 meetings a year, so we aim to meet quarterly. Obviously, that has been different this year. So there's there's those opportunities for the independent person to be involved in the committee. Outside of meetings, we do liaise quite closely with the independent person in relation to complaints that come in, and I call on the independent person quite frequently. So although they're not necessarily involved in hearings on a regular basis, there is opportunity for them to be involved there, but really welcome the idea of a perhaps mock meeting, or indeed just informal sessions with the committee to be able to discuss some of the issues that are arising and what we might do to address those as part of the induction process, and with no problem at all.
Thank you, Helen. Is that okay, Eddie? Okay. Any other questions? No, so can we agree this report?
Agreed.
Agreed. Right, item 8, such business, the opinion of the chairman, but we've got no other business to discuss. So that concludes the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance. Thank you.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.